And in an election year, we've got a shortened legislative session at the Illinois Statehouse. Today's the final day, folks. And yesterday, about 4:30, Governor J.B. Pritzker and State House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch and Senate President Don Harmon, they took to a podium outside of the governor's ceremonial office to announce they got a deal. And the deal is going to spend $45.6 billion. It's going to include a lot of bills being paid, a lot of debt being paid, more money for pensions, money for municipalities, more education dollars going to higher ed, a whole host of other things. Again, the highest spending budget in state history. Despite that, all that spending, it's going to include $1.8 billion in tax cuts. So we've seen this play out at the State House over the past week or so. And actually over the past month, we've seen a variety of different proposals when it comes to gas taxes, for instance. Republicans offered up their proposal to cap the sales tax on top of gas. That's after Governor J.B. Pritzker back in February offered up around $1 billion in tax cuts in his proposed plan. And that included freezing the gas tax that hasn't even gone into effect yet. And that gas tax is expected to be 2 to 3 cents. But the deal announced yesterday, not going to have that go into effect. So we'll see how all that plays out. But again, at the State House, you've got this plan coming together. It includes $1.8 billion of tax cuts. Before the governor and Democratic legislative leaders took to the podium in the Capitol, down in the basement, the press room, Republican senators were addressing some of their concerns about the ongoing budget process and how they ultimately feel left out of this and how they feel that their proposals for permanent relief is what's needed. So they laid out how their latest proposal, the Republicans, would have saved taxpayers $2.2 billion, including more relief for seniors, higher savings at the gas pump, not just the grocery tax freeze of 1%, but also freezing of the tax on any kind of pharmaceuticals there may be. So they laid out a whole host of different proposals, but they feel that their proposals aren't even being heard by the majority Democrats. So here you're gonna hear some of the voices at the State House from Republican State Senator Chapin Rose, followed by Governor J.B. Pritzker, followed by Senate Minority Leader Dan McConkey, followed by House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch. And then we'll hear from State Senator Don DeWitt on how Republicans feel that they are being left out of the budgeting process. So here's some of the sights and sounds from the Illinois State Capitol for a Statehouse Roundup here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. And let's go ahead and fire this off here.
There is a way to leave this building with permanent tax relief for the families of Illinois. And right now, they're not engaging in that conversation.
On groceries, a full year. On gas, again, 6 months up to January 1. And then, we'll revisit and see where we are with regard to oil prices in the world market and how that affects our gas prices.
Right now, we're seeing record high inflation, certainly what we've seen over the past few years. Families are hurting, but what we need to do is have this on an ongoing basis, not as some of the plan proposals are, which you have seen having checks arrive just before the election and then tax reductions expire right after the election.
The people that have been in this building to ask themselves, when has a budget been filed as early as it has been filed? We have been very intentional about getting a budget out early, allowing you all and the Republicans to participate. They've printed it out. They've read it. They participated in a budget hearing yesterday.
We had a meeting scheduled yesterday, as I mentioned, Greg. Literally 2 minutes before the meeting, it was canceled and not rescheduled. We have our budget proposal ready to go. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to talk about it. They want to shut out 5 to 6 million people who live in this state who deserve to be considered when it comes to how their tax dollars get spent in this annual budget process. They're shutting those people out of the process. That's not right. That's not bipartisan.
That's State Senator Don DeWitt there wrapping that up here with Springfield's Morning News. Just a review of some of the things that have happened in the past 24 hours when it comes to the budget negotiations, or lack thereof when it comes to bipartisan negotiations. So we'll watch all of this unfold at the Illinois State House and really start to delve into some of the specifics. Because yesterday afternoon, when they made the announcement, the Democrats made the announcement they got a plan here, they had yet to actually file it in bill form. But what we have seen filed this week was from House Democrats in a tax and spend proposal combined about 4,000 pages and a whole host of things as part of that, including tax incentives. So it's not just the tax cuts for consumers, it's tax incentives for businesses. And one characterization is that the tax cuts for consumers are temporary. The tax cuts for businesses are going to be permanent. And essentially with a sunset that they can continue to move forward. But as you heard Senate Minority Leader Dan McConkey, the temporary consumer tax cuts seems to be interestingly placed where people will get checks before the election and then their taxes will go back up after the election. Governor J.B. Pritzker saying that they can always revisit it in January if they need to. But let's turn our attention to some of the tax credits that they're going to be in this budget, possibly. Of course, State House in session today. It's the final day of spring session. They're expected to pass this budget. Is it going to be along party lines? Not too sure. It'll be interesting to see if Republicans vote against tax cuts, even if they are temporary. So that'll be an interesting story. But when it comes to the incentives, there's a variety of different incentives laid out, including incentives for the purchase of equipment and some sales tax breaks on the purchase of equipment, with the exclusion of one industry. So we'll get to that coming up next and share some more from the State House with you here on Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News. All right, we're back talking about the State House, a budget coming, what's in that budget. I've yet to go through it all myself. The final budget bill not filed whenever they announced it yesterday afternoon, but expected that today it's going to pass. So how they do that, they get a shell bill, they strip it, they fill it with all the contents, and then they pass it out of the chambers. But obviously it's going to be a lot of spending and $1.8 billion in tax cuts on consumers for like gas and property tax rebate and income tax rebate, earned income tax credits, and so on. So there's going to be a lot of money you're going to be able to keep in your pocket. Not as much as what the Republicans were looking for, and only for a temporary nature. Again, not what the Republicans wanted, but again, Republicans are in the super minority, so what are they going to be able to do about this? So some of the other ins and outs here, let's talk about the tax incentives. There's a variety of tax incentives laid out in the Democrats' proposal from the House earlier this week in committee. They talked about, in particular, one credit that Springfield area State Representative Tim Butler raised concerns the sales tax credit on manufacturing equipment for instance, for industries like the coal industry. So here's State Representative Tim Butler questioning State Representative Michael Zaleski about some of these issues concerning the tax credits for the coal industry.
Would I be okay to say that the business side tax
Representative
credits are the ones that
Davis-Meyer.
are long term, the short term are going to be the ones that affect people
That's
immediately this year?
that's a fair way to assess it, I would
Okay.
say. The
Right.
business tax credits are already in statute and we're extending them is what
Yes.
I would say.
I mean, we have the world's largest manufacturer of mining equipment in this state, headquartered now in Deerfield instead of Peoria. And we're taking this exemption out that's been there for 40 years. That's going to impact my constituents who go down in the coal mine in Waynesville every day because they're going to have more unsafe equipment because it's aging equipment, because the environmentalists said in committee, they're not going to support this tax incentive unless you take coal out.
And I just didn't get a sense that there was this hue and cry to keep the coal piece whole. So when you hear that, you make the adjustment that it's a revenue increase to take coal out. So if we're giving this tax incentive to those who may not need it anymore, maybe we don't need to do it anymore. This is a very basic legislative response.
Again, hearing some of the debate about various provisions of this budget that could include the tax incentives for the coal industry when it comes to buying equipment, making their employees safer. That tax incentive apparently is not going to be there. Again, we don't know what will pass ultimately. Just some high level items, but all of this begs the question about the process. And here we are on the last day, and the bill's thousands of pages. Taxpayers not really, waking up this morning, getting your coffee. You got to make sure you get the kids to school. You got some personal events tonight. Hey, it's the weekend. I just want to unplug. And here we are with the final pieces being put together on the budget on the last day. But the process Republicans were critical of. And again, you'll hear from this House committee earlier this week with House Majority Leader Greg Harris. And also you've got State Representative C.D. Davidsmeyer talking about this with State Representative Tim Butler as well, questioning the House Majority Leader. So here's some of the back and forth when it comes to the process of putting this budget together.
When I was on Appropriations Public Safety for 2 terms, I think I said in 2 meetings where we actually went line by line in the budget, just 2 meetings. How come we don't do that? How come we actually don't go through line by line collaboratively and try to figure out what the budget's going to be instead of, finding the secrets?
I think
Super
this
secret
year,
room somewhere.
because of the tyranny of the clock, as they call it, where, simply, the clock outran us with the shortened session.
All right. I appreciate your good humor, Leader Harris.
Certainly in years past, when I first came in, we certainly went through the appropriations process pretty deep through the committees. Seemed like during the Rauner years went completely away from that. And now we're, it seems like this year we're trying to pretend like the April 8th date crept up on us and we didn't know about it. We knew about it the whole time.
So again, that's just some of the ongoing back and forth between Republicans and Democrats at the Illinois State House. Another element to this is taxpayers still don't have audited financials from a budget that ended more than 281 days ago. And you've got the politics entering here with the Republican comptroller candidate, Shannon Teresi, saying that the comptroller's not doing her job. I talked to the comptroller, and she said, listen, she can't release the audited financials because she's not the one that does the audit. It's the Auditor General. I asked the Auditor General, where are those 281-day-old audited financials? And they don't disclose the status of such things. But again, just shows you how we still don't know the full fiscal year audited financials from the previous fiscal year, not the one we're currently in. While they made a budget for the fiscal year that's set to start July 1st. Other issues, the House rejected a measure that was dealing with the Blue Cross Blue Shield dispute, and you'll see obviously today, the final day of session, a lot of action going to be happening on criminal justice and support for police. All in an election year. So brace yourself. All right. It's going to be an interesting run to November. It's now 7 o'clock. We'll talk with Abe Bate of Illinois next on WMAY.